Hi, my name is Margaret Hart, and it's my job today to give you some idea of where I see industrial heritage in the greater tourism plan after COVID-19. And seeing as the important thing here is what I'm going to say, not me. I am now going to switch it round to the slideshow. It is a bit of a mammoth commitment to offer insights into how I envisage that industrial heritage, part of that matriushka of cultural heritage, can reinvent itself in the post-COVID-19 tourism scenario in order to recreate quality of life for the community whose identity it forms part of, and thus give them reasons to protect and preserve it. As part of the matriushka of tourism, industrial heritage pre-COVID-19 was always one of the smallest dolls on the very inside, a specialist field with a highly enthusiastic audience, mainly male, it must be said, one doll behind archaeology with a broader gender appeal, and geotourism as in strictly geological. At least in Spain, and in the south in general, this is the case. Like cultural heritage or cruise trips, industrial heritage at best attracted one-night stays on European routes and at worst, day excursions accumulating masses of people to little economic effect and even negative quality of life for residents. A large majority of preservation of industrial heritage sites and representation as museums and archives depended upon private funding or public subsidies or on the work of devoted NGOs, a scenario that is, at present, unfeasible in the immediate post-COVID-19 scenario. So pre-COVID-19, industrial heritage was fraught with problems for attracting tourism per se, not excursions, such as negative associations with contamination and harsh working conditions, often historically awkward or difficult, and intellectually demanding generally, and usually easier to sell in the north, where expected as part of the identity framework, and weather conditions predisposed towards museum and historical identity, than in the south, where other, more hedonistic elements prevail. Well, I think I echo everybody when I say there is no going back to the gigantic cruisers and thousands of excursionists being emptied into a city for a few hours in the new health safety climate. And after the residents of the city, formerly besieged by disrespectful tourists, have experienced what it is to achieve some form of quality city life, albeit in confinement. So where does that leave the matriushka of cultural heritage tourism based on preservation, promotion and protection of identity and competitive difference? And where does it leave that tiny doll of industrial heritage within the larger framework? Well, one of the answers is that being small has suddenly become potentially beautiful. And so the perspectives are not necessarily pessimistic and may in fact be realistically positive, seeing that utopias, as in places, topos, where you can live as part of a community, safely and with solidarity, are, as Robert Owen so rightly predicted and embodied in New Lanark, Scotland, not only possible but desirable in the post-COVID-19 scenario. Which is why this is called Realistic Utopias, with my apologies to Rutger Bregman and in honour of Robert Owen. So the first thing then is small is beautiful. The first thing that is going to be affected in tourism and has been affected is the scale, and the emphasis will now be on quality, not on quantity. That is, what is more responsible and sustainable for a place in a community? 6,000 or more excursionists for 6 hours, or 6 families staying for 2 weeks to a month in the community? The answer is more is less, And as I said before, small and personalised is better. Big tourist firms will crash. TUI is already on its way there. The cruisers will not float again, either economically or literally, and airlines will be forced to reduce traffic and reorganise capacities and conditions, revising destinations in view of perceptions of safety and health control. When safety is a prime concern, people will be looking for more personalised solutions that they can manage and control. Europe is already advocating staycations for 2020, that is, no cross-border travel. And safety considerations will have already foreclosed places for tourists like the United States, Brazil, England, that is not the whole of the UK, and changed the ranking for places like South Korea, Taiwan, and New Zealand positively. Many places in Europe and indeed around the world affected by deindustrialization and rural exodus to the overcrowded cities, who have been struggling to maintain their community and the tangible and intangible heritage surrounding areas that were once thriving areas of industry, like New Lanark, will now be considered attractive for that staycation. The fragile nature of the city, dependent on its resources externally, has been evidenced in scarcity of basic items the world over just recently. You know, flour to make bread, and of course what you're all thinking about, toilet rolls, and depletion of stocks of fresh food due to uneconomic long-distance transportation instead of circular economies based on zero-kilometre strategies. Likewise, young people who have been cooped up in grossly expensive apartments with no ventilation or views in either solitary confinement or with a new partner, and whose jobs have been frozen or lost due to COVID-19, will seriously consider upsizing to move to rural areas should other amenities such as internet be upcycled in the countryside. Given the right conditions for co-working, co-housing and co-creating, these communities can create new attractions around and inside the industrial heritage that will reactivate identity, investment and quality of community life, regenerating life and community in abandoned areas and co-responsibly recreating sense of place with new clean energy. Because as Jane Jacobs, the Canadian urban planner, said, there is no place without a community, and there is no community without a place. In Spain, as in many other countries across the globe, rural regeneration in deindustrialized areas was a major priority on the agenda pre-COVID-19 and will be an even greater priority post-COVID-19. So combining this, in the case of industrial heritage, with academic and residential voluntourism to recreate community and jobs through reuse and rehabilitation of industrial heritage, thereby regenerating identity and roots, would appear to be the way to go. The emphasis is on bringing people back into contact with their cultural heritage, with nature and their roots. This is not a utopia, as Robert Owen proved back in the 19th century. Big cities have just as big pollution problems and produce radical inequalities and enormous precarious. This is not a utopia, as Robert Owen proved back in the 19th century. Big cities have just as big pollution problems and produce radical inequalities and precarious safety. They would take a long time to recover from COVID-19 and successive pandemics, and in some ways, such as care for the elderly and adequate provisions of healthcare, may never recover. People, however, have rediscovered the value of community, meanwhile, of working together to care for one another in desperate circumstances. With situations as extreme as Spain's, where only 5% of the population lives in over 53% of the territory, redistribution is a requirement. And large infrastructures such as universities, massive hotels and residences will face partial, if not total, redundancy with reorganisation of traffic and time as more people work from home. Therefore, the city will not be the future for everybody. The future does not lie in subsidies or bailouts, but rather in communities taking co-responsible control of their destinies, recycling, reinventing, and regenerating quality of life. This means intergenerational interaction, with significant underscoring of gender equality and integrated heritage management. My work in tourism has always been hands-on, training trainers and leaders, working with communities for them to learn how to take control of their destinies, and with zero budget. The big budgets in industrial heritage always go to the architects and to the tangible side. So let me tell you that you can still do things without a budget as long as you have motivated people. The photo on the slide shows a textile factory, Fábrica Imbabura, a part of the UNESCO Global Geopark in the province of Imbabura in Ecuador, the only one of its kind at present in the country. The factory had an ignominious history and had shattered and destroyed the community identity, a community that was singularly European at the time and that gave rise to the first trade union movements, had lain abandoned for years and was restored and rehabilitated as a cultural hub, together with the railway system that had previously attended to the needs of the factory for transport of cotton, both raw and manufactured, as part of a major plan involving the Prometeo scholarships under the presidency of Rafael Correa. Textile factories abound in Ecuador, above all in this area where the hydroelectric possibilities were great thanks to the high relief and geological features prevailing. A decision was taken to restore only one, the one in best conditions and whose community had been most greatly shattered by its closing. These decisions, although difficult, when resources are scarce and must be mismanaged, simply must be done, with the emphasis on restoring quality of life responsibly for a community through restoration of identity and self-esteem. The complex is an active centre of textile design true to its origins and offering new openings for the mainstream activity in the area, textile manufacture, plus the complex is an active centre of textile design, true to its origins and offering new openings for the mainstream activity in the area, textile manufacture. It has an auditorium, tourist attractions, conference centre, museums, train route, restaurant and open-air event forum, and an educational hub for lifelong learning from adult courses through to children's visits. There is a special museum of science and technology designed for kids. The community, 4 years on from opening, has changed quite sizably for the better, even given the major changes that have occurred in Ecuador since, not necessarily for the better, with COVID-19 as the last in a long series of reasons for unrest. Putting the industrial heritage inside its natural context as part of the UNESCO Global Geopark in Imbabura has also afforded quality international marketing of an area that simply did not figure on international tourist perception maps, or when it did, was totally controlled by external agents and intermediaries, causing loss of potential income to the host community. This is an excellent complement to the perceived international tourist attraction nearby on the same train route in Otavalo, famous for its handicraft and textile market, known familiarly as La Plaza de los Ponchos. Here, industrial heritage, seen correctly in its full and integrated context, is upscaled from the tiny doll in the Matryoshka to a regenerated size of greater importance in attracting stay-over tourists to a region and places within that region they might never have visited before. So industrial heritage regenerated and integrally managed by the community to make best use of resources can become a major element on the tourism map. Just like the monument to the regenerated working community made out of recycled textile machinery seen here figures on the local horizons and perceptions, making new positive associations between heritage and place. Industrial heritage must be managed integrally, in context and co-responsibly with and for the community for it to truly generate investment and recreate activity and interest in any place. So wherever industrial heritage exists, just like any other heritage, it must be capable of being managed toward regeneration of community initiatives through new forms of cooperative tourism, with a view to longer residential tourism or repeat community tourism, and should offer unique experiences, like a global geopark, to sustain a community-controlled tourism with the revenue directly reinvested in improving quality of life for hosts and guests. That's what we call responsible tourism. So as explained by the Barefoot Foundation, a group of NGOs who have brought out guidelines for community organisation in extreme circumstances, usually in India, Bangladesh and Africa, the problem with tourism is not the old one of, I'm hungry, you give me a fish, I eat today, or even, I'm hungry, you give me a rod and teach me how to fish and I can feed myself and my family for longer, but rather, when the rivers are polluted or have run dry, you have taught me how to organise so I can adapt and find solutions. My last slide talks about virtual reality and high-tech solutions not being the answer, although they're being brought up at present. There is no substitute in tourism for meeting people and experiencing places haphazardly, much as Rousseau did on his Rêverie d'un promeneur solitaire, when thinking himself alone in a pristine, unexplored part of Switzerland, he discovered the stocking factory just behind him. To think of industry and the Industrial Revolution as intimately linked with nature and forging strong community with people who show solidarity and fight for their safety and well-being in extreme circumstances is an idea that has been around since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution all over the world. However, when we Google wonderful nature photos, we are presented with solitary landscapes with no people or buildings. But everything has changed. If you Google photos of solitude at the moment, and from now on, the chances are you will find photos of people suffering confinement in big blocks of flats, all totally divorced the ones from the other. The basic resources of industry and of all human activity are controlled by natural conditions, and our planet is not limitless. We have to recycle everything to best purpose and curb excesses from within. COVID-19 has been responsible for curbing our excesses, whether we like it or not, because we had overstepped the limits. But as Janine Benyus, one of the founders of biomimicry that gave rise to the circular economy, among other inventions, and all the other, but as Janine Benyus, one of the founders of biomimicry that gave rise to the circular economy and a whole load of other revolutionary inventions such as high-speed trains, collecting wood from the air and regreening the deserts, tells us if we apply the 9 basic principles of nature to everything, we do as communities in industrial heritage and in cultural heritage tourism management, we will be living within our means, which is what economy really means, and we will grow. This may mean using your heritage as a covered greenhouse for community allotments and gangster gardening courses, or developing a co-working nursery, university nursery on clean energy and biomimicry startups. But whatever you do, please never give up on a realistic search for your utopia with your industrial heritage. The place, topos, where you can do what you know best together and are most enthusiastic about with other experts to make our common goods, our natural environment and our culture truly belong to the community again, co-creating places where we can truly belong and can responsibly welcome guests. Okay, so post-COVID is going to bring a new form of social organisation where people actually are going to be more in touch with one another instead of the opposite. And much as I want to make our whole interaction artificial with artificial intelligence, I can tell you my experience is that there's no substitute for the natural version, and it can be put to industrial purpose with great success. So thanks and good luck.